Welcome back. Last lesson was the vulnerability, the weakness inside the system. Today we are looking at the smoke, the signs that the weakness has been used, the system is compromised, and somebody is moving around inside who should not be there. This is indicators of malicious activity, and it is the most SOC-flavored objective on the entire exam. Picture this. Mid-tier SOC, Tuesday morning, an analyst is going through the overnight queue. 3,000 alerts. 2,000 are noise. She is hammering through them. At 3:47 a.m., in a quiet corner of the user creation log, a new domain admin account was created. Name, sysadmin-bak, capitalization off from the standard. The analyst almost misses it because her filter is tuned for failed login spikes. She does not. She digs in. The account was created by a service account that has not run that command in the last 90 days. She pivots to that service account's recent logins. She finds a login from a workstation that has never connected to the domain controller before at 3:40 a.m. from an internal IP. From there, the unwind is fast. The threat actor had been inside for 11 days, picked up a domain admin token through a Mimikatz-dumped, and was now creating a backdoor account for persistence. She catches it. The breach gets contained at day 11 instead of day 80. The thing that saved that company was one indicator, a new admin account at 3 a.m., made by an account that should not have made it. Anyone who has pulled a midnight forensics call knows the feeling. The signal was always in the data. Somebody just had to read it. Let me rank indicators by signal to noise, because the exam wants you to know which ones are gold and which ones are just noise that the textbook calls signal. Top tier, impossible travel. 2 logins, geographically far apart, separated by less time than a flight could cover. Almost always a true positive. Top tier, new admin account creation by an unexpected source. Almost always a true positive. Top tier, missing logs. Logs do not delete themselves. Top tier, outbound traffic to unusual external IPs, especially at odd hours. C2 communication, mid-tier, concurrent sessions from different locations, unusual resource consumption, new processes that do not match installed software. Lower tier on signal to noise but still must know, AV or IDS, blocked content alerts, account lockouts, and out-of-cycle logging. Those last 3 generate a lot of false positives in busy environments. The exam wants you to recognize all of them. Start with malware types and the indicators that tie back to each. Ransomware first because it is the loudest. What ransomware does, encrypts the victim's files and demands payment for the decryption key. Delivery is phishing email, RDP exploitation, drive-by download. Indicators are unmistakable in retrospect. Files renamed with new extensions like .locky, .ryuk, .conti. A ransom note left in directories, readme.txt, decrypt instructions.html. Sudden spike in CPU and disk I/O as the encryption process tears through the file system. Inability to open files. Shadow copies deleted because the ransomware tries to wipe Windows VSS, so you cannot just roll back. Notable strains: WannaCry, Revil, Lockbit, Ryuk, Conti. Modern operation is ransomware as a service, where low-skill affiliates rent the malware platform from a core developer team. The immediate response: isolate the infected machine, yank the network cable, disable the wireless, kill the VPN session. Lateral movement is the killer with ransomware, and isolation buys you the next 60 seconds. Trojan. A Trojan disguises itself as legitimate software and performs malicious actions once executed. Indicators are unexpected outbound network connections from a process that should not be making them, new processes that do not match anything installed, and modifications to startup entries. Subtypes: remote access Trojan, RAT, gives the attacker interactive remote control. Banker Trojan steals financial credentials. Dropper Trojan exists only to deliver more malware. Trojans require user interaction to execute, which is the exam line that distinguishes them from worms. Worm self-replicates and spreads across a network without user interaction. That is the headline. Indicators are unusually high network traffic, multiple hosts exhibiting the same symptoms simultaneously, and rapid spread. Worms exploit network vulnerabilities to spread autonomously, no user click needed. Notable examples: WannaCry, which combined a worm with ransomware. Slammer, Code Red. The classic worm indicator on the exam is high network traffic across many hosts. Fast. Spyware secretly collects information about the user, browsing habits, credentials, personal data. Indicators are browser redirects, homepage changes you did not make, sluggish performance, unauthorized data exfiltration in network logs, pop-up ads, often bundled with free software, the so-called adware component. Keylogger functionality is frequently included. Bloatware, unwanted pre-installed software, also called PUP, potentially unwanted program, not malicious by design but consumes resources and may create privacy risks, can also be a vector for more serious malware. Indicators, unexpected applications at startup, high resource usage, unknown processes you cannot account for. Virus, the classic, attaches to legitimate files and spreads when the infected file is executed or shared. The key trait requires user action to spread, unlike a worm. Indicators are unexpected file size changes, file corruption, performance degradation, and AV alerts. Subtypes the exam wants: boot sector virus, macrovirus, polymorphic virus that mutates its signature to evade detection, and metamorphic virus that rewrites its own code on every infection. Polymorphic and fileless are the modern troublemakers because signature-based AV cannot pin them down. Keylogger records keystrokes to capture passwords, PINs, credit card numbers. Software keyloggers run as a process. Hardware keyloggers are physical devices plugged between the keyboard and the computer, invisible to software-based AV because they live below the OS layer. Indicators are credential theft, when there was no other apparent attack vector, unknown processes, suspicious registry entries, used in targeted attacks against executives and financial staff. Logic bomb, malicious code that executes when a specific condition is met, a specific date, a user account being deleted, a file being accessed, a login count threshold. Indicators are sudden destructive behavior tied to a specific date, but, and this is the trap, there is almost no indicator before the trigger fires. The bomb sits dormant. The classic insider threat scenario: disgruntled administrator plants a logic bomb that wipes user accounts the day after their employment ends. They quit, the bomb fires, the systems implode. Defense is code reviews, separation of duties, and tight change management. Rootkit hides itself and other malware at the OS or firmware level, modifies the kernel to avoid detection. The defining trait: rootkits are the hardest malware to detect because they subvert the very tools used to find them. Types are user mode rootkit, kernel mode rootkit, which runs at the highest privilege level, bootkit, which infects the boot sector or UEFI, and hypervisor rootkit. Indicators are discrepancies between what processes the OS sees versus what an external tool sees. Hidden files, AV that cannot find what behavioral tools see. Detection requires offline scanning, dedicated anti-rootkit tools, or integrity checking like Tripwire. Removal often requires a full OS reinstall, and bootkits may require firmware reflash. If you have ever rebuilt a box because nothing else would clear it, you know the feeling. Now physical attacks. Brute force in the physical sense, breaking locks, smashing windows, bypassing physical access controls. RFID cloning, copying the data from an RFID access card to make a duplicate, completely bypasses card-based access control if the cards are not encrypted properly. Environmental attacks, sabotaging HVAC, power, or cooling systems to damage hardware or cause downtime. The principle to remember: physical security is foundational. If an attacker can physically touch the system, many logical controls fail. Network attacks. DDoS, distributed denial of service, 3 flavors: volumetric, flood the bandwidth with traffic; UDP flood, ICMP flood, DNS amplification; protocol, exploit protocol weaknesses, the classic SYN flood that exhausts TCP connection tables; application layer, layer 7, HTTP/GET or POST floods that exhaust web server resources. DDoS uses many compromised hosts, a botnet. DOS uses one source. Indicators are service unavailability, extremely high inbound traffic, exhausted server connections. DNS poisoning, also called DNS spoofing, corrupting a DNS cache with false records so users get redirected to attacker-controlled IPs. Indicator is users being redirected to unexpected sites, SSL certificate mismatches when they get there. On-path attack, formerly called man-in-the-middle, MITM, but CompTIA renamed it. The attacker positions between two communicating parties, intercepts, and potentially modifies the traffic. Indicators are unexpected certificate warnings, unusual ARP table entries which suggest ARP poisoning, and slow connections from the redirect overhead. Credential replay. The attacker captures valid authentication tokens or hashes and replays them to gain access without ever cracking the password. Pass the hash, PTH, is the textbook example. Capture an NTLM hash and replay it. Defense is Kerberos rather than NTLM where possible, MFA, so the captured credential alone is not enough, in session tokens with short expiry. Wireless attacks. Evil twin and rogue AP, fake access point with the same SSID as a legitimate network. Deauthentication attack, flood 802.11 DUth frames to disconnect clients, then capture the four-way handshake when they reconnect. WPA2 handshake capture for offline brute force cracking. Defense is WPA3 where possible, VPN over wireless, and being suspicious of any unexpected disconnects. Application attacks, injection, SQLI, XSS, command injection, malicious code into input fields. Buffer overflow beyond memory boundaries, replay attack, replaying captured legitimate requests or tokens. Privilege escalation in two flavors. Vertical, gaining higher privileges from user to admin or root, and horizontal, accessing another user's resources at the same privilege level. CSRF, tricking an authenticated user into an unwanted action. Directory traversal, accessing files outside the web root. The exam loves vertical versus horizontal as a question pattern. Cryptographic attacks. Downgrade attack, force the use of a weaker, older protocol. SSL stripping forces HTTPS to drop to HTTP. Collision attack, find two different inputs that produce the same hash output. Breaking the integrity guarantee. Birthday attack, probability-based attack, exploiting the birthday paradox to find hash collisions much faster than brute force. The reason birthday attack matters is hash collisions are far more likely than intuition suggests, mathematically. Downgrade attacks target negotiation protocols, TLS handshake, SSH version negotiation. Password attacks. 5 flavors. Password spraying. Try a few common passwords like password1bang or summer 2024 bang against many accounts, deliberately staying below the lockout threshold per account. This is the go-to technique against enterprise environments because it sidesteps account lockout policies. Brute force, try every possible combination, slow and almost always blocked by lockout. Dictionary attack, try words from a list of common passwords, faster than full brute force. Rainbow table, pre-computed hash-to-password lookup table, fast but defeated by salting hashes. Credential stuffing, use username and password pairs leaked from other breaches against your service. Exploits the universal human habit of password reuse. The defenses tier, MFA first, account lockout for brute force, password complexity, salting against rainbow tables, and credential monitoring for stuffing. Now indicators of compromise, IoCs, the forensic crumbs. Account lockout patterns suggest brute force or password spraying. Concurrent sessions from different geographic locations suggest credential theft. Somebody else is logged in with the stolen creds. Impossible travel. Log in from New York at noon and from London 30 minutes later. No flight covers that gap. Account is compromised. Blocked content alerts from AV or IDS indicate malware tried to execute and may indicate partial infection downstream. Unusual resource consumption suggests crypto mining, ransomware encryption, or worm propagation. Resource inaccessibility means files have been encrypted by ransomware or a denial of service condition has hit. Out-of-cycle logging. Activity at 3 a.m. when nobody should be working. Every SOC analyst's favorite signal. Missing logs. Somebody deleted them to cover their tracks. Always suspicious. New admin accounts created without a change ticket. Backdoor for persistence. Outbound traffic to unusual IPs. Command and control C2, communication to the attacker's infrastructure. DNS queries to unusual domains. C2 over DNS tunneling, where the attacker uses DNS as a covert channel because most organizations do not inspect it. Unexpected firewall rule changes. Attacker modifying network access to keep their hold. Let me give you a second shift SOC scenario, because the indicator recognition skill is a muscle. Analyst signs in for the overnight rotation. Standard alert fatigue setup. 1,200 alerts in the queue, half of them low priority. He filters by the unusual ones first. He sees a single alert, outbound DNS queries from an internal workstation to a domain that resolves nowhere meaningful. The domain is something like 7 random characters.top. Domain reputation services flag it as suspicious. The volume is low, 3 or 4 queries per minute. Easy to miss. The analyst pivots into the workstation's process list and finds a process running out of a temp directory under a username that looks legit at first glance, but is 1 character off from a real account. Now the picture sharpens. The DNS queries are command and control over DNS tunneling. The malware is using DNS because most enterprises do not inspect DNS, and the low query rate is intentional to fly under volume-based detection. He isolates the host, escalates, and the rest of the night is forensics. The lesson, outbound DNS queries to unusual domains, is one of the highest signal indicators on this objective. C2 over DNS is a common technique. Memorize that pairing. Another scenario, because the rootkit question on the exam loves a classic shape. Sysadmin running standard host enumeration tools, task manager and process list sees nothing suspicious. The system feels slow. He runs an offline scan from external boot media. The offline scan finds processes the live OS did not show. That is a kernel mode rootkit hiding processes by hooking the system calls that enumerate them. From the live OS, the rootkit subverts every tool that asks the question. From offline, the rootkit is just files on disk, and the scan sees them. Detection requires offline scanning or anti-rootkit tools, and removal often requires a full OS reinstall. Bootkits, which are rootkits in UEFI or boot sector, may require a firmware reflash. The exam line, rootkits are the hardest malware to detect, and the reason is they subvert the tools used to find them. And one more on impossible travel, because that indicator alone has caught more credential theft incidents than half the rest combined. User logs in from Chicago at 1 p.m. Eastern. Same user logs in from Lagos at 1:25 p.m. Eastern. No flight covers Chicago to Lagos in 25 minutes. The cloud identity provider flags it. Either the user is using a VPN that egresses through Lagos, or somebody else has the credentials. Investigation takes minutes. Call the user. If they are not on a Lagos VPN, the account is compromised. Reset the credentials, kill the active sessions, audit what the Lagos session touched. Modern identity platforms, Azure AD, Okta, Ping, all have impossible travel detection built in. The exam wants you to recognize the indicator and know what it means. 2 logins from geographically distant locations in too short a time. Account is compromised. Recap, action checklist style. 1. Ransomware indicator is files with new extensions, ransom note high disk I/O. 2. Rootkit is the hardest to detect, requires offline scanning. 3. Logic bomb is the insider threat tool. No indicator before detonation. 4. Worm is high network traffic across many hosts, no user action. 5. On-path attack is the new term for MITM, intercepts traffic between 2 parties. 6. Password spraying avoids lockout by trying few passwords against many accounts, distinct from brute force. 7. Credential stuffing uses leaked credentials, exploits password reuse. 8. Impossible travel means 2 logins from impossibly distant locations in too short a time. 9. Missing logs always suspicious, attacker covered tracks. 10. Vertical privilege escalation is up the privilege ladder, horizontal is sideways to appears resources. If you can rattle those off in under 60 seconds, you are ready for IOC questions. Next lesson 2.5, we close out domain 2 with the answer to all of this. Mitigation techniques. The controls, the segmentation, the patching, the least privilege, the encryption. The toolbox you actually deploy to make the indicators stop showing up. I will see you there.